Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second installment of Samurai Month.
Watch out.
Uh, Judge, what chow is it?
That's
um,
that's the that's the tagline this month is just watch out.
okay, good, good. I'm glad that the last thing we reviewed had that much of an impact. No. So with me again, as you can hear, is Bill. It'd be really weird if he wasn't here. This is his channel after
It's
all.
happened
But
before though. That's the weirder thing.
has it?
Yeah, on S.O.S. Many
Oh,
times
okay.
I've been like, I'm
Yeah,
not coming. I've got better things to do.
yeah, that's
You
right.
guys
That's right.
do it, and then I'll put it up on my channel, and you're like, all right. I love those times.
Yeah, those are
It's when
fun
I
because then
feel
we
I
just
have
talk.
my most power.
Those are kind of fun because then we just talk shit about you and you're
Yeah, then you're like, oh, he's not even gonna hear it. I do. I'm just like, I don't care. But you guys pretend like you say things that you wouldn't say to my face. Like you say it, like that's all you say. Like it's not like some big surprise. Like, oh Jesus, they're saying things that may or may not hurt my feelings. Oh boy, what a shock!
Hmm. But but yeah.
It's like
So
learning that I'm an old man is in a big armor suit. It's just about as surprising as that. Oh, spoiler alert.
yeah. Oh, for a second there, for a second there, I thought you were making an Iron Man reference, and I was like, why is he making an Iron Man
It
reference right
kind
now?
of was an Iron Man deal. We'll talk about it.
Yeah. So anyway, we're here to talk about the Wolverine. Now, as I mentioned last week, the Wolverine, not really a samurai movie, but it does have quite a bit of
I think it's
of
more of one than you give it credit for.
sure,
I
sure,
think it belongs
thematically.
in this. I mean, like, you never said it was just going to be traditional Japanese old school samurai movies. You just kind of gave it the general theme of samurai. And in that, yeah, it totally works with that. And the themes that they're expressing with the character, totally.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, thematically and aesthetically, there are lots of samurai influences in it, and as I said last time, it just happened to be the next X-Men movie that we needed to review. So the confluence of those two
That was the
things,
beautiful fucking symmetry there.
yes, the confluence of those two factors made it too good to resist. Now, this is going to be an interesting one because this is one of the X-Men films that Bill has not seen. And it's also the first time that James Mangold, not going to call him Brian again like I did last time, the first time that James Mangold stepped behind for directing duties on a Wolverine picture. And I remember seeing this back in 2013 when it came out. Oddly, it was better than either of the two Marvel offerings that year. You might disagree with me on that. You like Iron Man 3 a whole lot more than I do. But I remember watching this in 2013 and thinking, wow, if only they would give this guy an R-rated movie. And then here we are for however many years later, and we've had Logan now, and we got to see that I was right. Give the man an R rating, and he can really deliver. But I think that for the restrictions he was working under, he managed to deliver something pretty solid here, and I think it's kind of underrated. You don't really hear a lot of people talk about this one. What was your impression?
Yeah, I pretty much felt the same way, especially in terms of it being underrated. I mean, it came out in a packed summer, like you mentioned Iron Man 3. And then what else? I mean, Thor: The Dark World didn't come out until November, so that felt very distant. But Man of Steel was also that summer, so
That's
it
true.
definitely, and
That's true.
Pacific Rim, it definitely got buried. And Grown Ups too. Let's not forget that incredible superhero
Oh,
film.
of course.
Uh,
That one really jumped.
I just don't want to leave anything out, Dylan.
That
Uh,
box office smash.
you're not even joking. That's the scary thing. Um, uh, it came out in a packed summer, and it definitely was underrated. But more than that, I'll go further. I think it was kind of ahead of its time in a way, because I think it reflects more of the way we make superhero movies now, where there's a million of them, and they all have to fit different subgenres in and of this bigger subgenre. You know, like, okay, so superhero is a subgenre in and of itself, although now that's kind of not really the case. But there's all these little like subgenres of, oh, these are the super sci-fi superhero ones, and these are the more street level ones. And
Yeah.
uh
You
this
watch you watch one movie, it's about a fucking superhero wizard. You'd watch another movie, it's a fucking spy thriller with a superhero. Like Very
One's an
different.
intergalactic like space adventure. They're all filling different niches in and of themselves, and this kind of tie themselves together with similar themes. And I feel like this is taking more of that approach, and it's also more character driven than I think even the other X-Men movies were. Specifically because we spend a lot of time getting to know. I mean, we already know Wolverine, especially since this is after Origins. Maybe we know him too much. But
maybe we know things we would have rather never found out.
yeah, exactly. But regardless, especially oh god, what's her name? The girl who he ends up falling for. Morocco? No, it's not. It's not Morocco. That sounds terrible. I read the comic. This is loosely based on. What the fuck's her name?
It's Mariko, isn't it?
Mariko. Thank you. I was waiting for you to come in. Jesus, say save my ass. Fucking. So yeah,
that's not the one. That's not the one.
We get a lot of time getting to know her. So I thought I liked that, and I just felt like okay. We're not constantly forcing the fucking action cliches down our throat in this movie. And I thought that was really, really nice and a nice change of pace. And why I thought it feels a little bit more like something that would have been made these 5 years later where we've had a million of these things now and it's time to kind of push different boundaries that we've been pushing in the last couple of years with stuff like Logan.
That's not the girl who wound up becoming Lady Deathstrike later on, is it? Because
no, I was confused by that as well because I've seen the X-Men animated series from the 90s, and they combined those two characters in that.
Yeah, they also did it in X-Men not X-Men Origins, that fucking game that I played, Wolverine's Revenge on PS2 back in the day, with the wonderful voice talents of Mark Hamill as Logan.
Well, how weird that is, but you watch like The Last Jedi, and you're like, oh, okay, I can kind of see that now.
Yeah. I didn't know it was him for years, and I just assumed it was the guy from the animated series, but he does a really good Wolverine. Anyway, they did that in that too. Like I remember her being very Asian in her aesthetic, and I think he even calls her Mariko at one point in that game. I'm not sure. So that was always a confusing element for me whenever I watched this movie.
Right. I mean, all the different continuities are different. I mean, in this version, Wolverine only seems to have spent time in Japan during World War II and none other. But in the comics, like in the story that this is loosely based on by Frank Miller, and I think Klaus Janson also worked on it? Or maybe it was Chris Claremont? I'm not sure. One of them. Wolverine goes to Japan having already had a relationship with Mariko, and she's in an arranged marriage. It's pretty much the same setup. Like, she's in a marriage she doesn't want to be with this crazy conspiracy going on, and it may or may not involve supernatural shit, although the supernatural shit is the hand in the comic, and not what it is in this movie, because obviously Fox didn't have the right to use the hand. So, the point that I'm making, though, is that the actual, kind of aesthetic that we're going for here is very different from not only any of the other X-Men movies, but from just other superhero movies and other science fiction stuff at the time. We're stepping into this like subdued, realistic Japanese crime world, and I was really happy with how long we stayed as like kind of grounded with it. That was the other thing that impressed me. We didn't get crazy with the X-Men stuff until the very end. And it just like broaches the point where you're like, all right, maybe it's too much with what we had earlier, but it doesn't really matter. Overall, I thought this was great. I think it's only held back by its rating, and even then I was really pleasantly surprised by how much that wasn't an issue. Like, he pushes it as far as he can, and to the point where you kind of don't even really notice.
And I remember reviews of this coming out at the time that were like, "Oh, it's another, like Wolverine movie," and like basically trying to play it off as if it was like no better than what had come before. I think this is miles.
I mean, that's not only is that wrong, but that's somebody who clearly has some kind of vendetta against this franchise or against Fox or whatever. I don't understand where that's coming from. Like, this is such a radically... It's not only more competently made, but it clearly has a vision, and the people making it are clearly having a good time being there. And it doesn't feel like a movie made by committee.
Yeah, it's miles ahead of what we had in Origins. Maybe not. Of course, it's not to where we got with Logan, but it's so
I was almost
in
like,
between.
I was weirded. I mean, I think the weirdest thing about it now is that it almost feels, it doesn't feel redundant, but it feels like had James Mangold known he was going to make Logan, I don't think he would have made this the same way.
Yeah, there
Because
are
he
a few,
covers
like,
a lot of this. He covers a lot of the same ground early on. When we kind of get into it later, it becomes very different, which I like.
there are some similar plot devices that are used, um, like
But
the
I mean,
idea of
he's still
stripping.
young. He's still in his prime until like halfway through the movie, so it's not exactly the same. But a lot of the ideas of the line between the savage beast and trying to be a civilized man, and can he do either? You know,
And
that's
also,
what Logan was about. You know, this takes similar like initial kind of looks at it and ways of expressing it, but then it goes in different directions with it later on.
yeah, and also the idea of stripping him of his healing abilities. He does that in both movies.
Yeah, and making it a little bit more of a gritty, you know, grounded kind of adventure by doing that. But
Although
this,
although it's different because in Logan he still has his powers. They're just like
yes,
slowing down.
yeah, like he can still take a lot of punishment. It just doesn't. It just takes a lot longer for him to heal up. In this, he also takes a lot of punishment when he doesn't have the healing, but it doesn't heal up at all. Like there's that great scene where he's sitting outside the porno hotel in the rain because the rain is helping him like stay awake, and at a certain point even that's not enough. That was the other thing about it. The reason why I didn't see this at the time, two things. One, the trailer was terrible. I think that we can agree. If you go back to it now, you'll agree with me.
I don't remember.
The trailer for this was terrible.
I don't really remember the trailer, but I do remember not being super optimistic.
I remember watching it at the time and going, "Fuck." They messed it up again. Like this is such a no-brainer. And I think the PG-13 thing, like I was a junior in high school when this came out. Or no, I think I was a senior in high school. So I was done with PG-13 Wolverine, you know? Like I wanted an R-rated Wolverine.
You also weren't.
This was a summer where we had Superman snapping dudes' necks. So I wanted an R-rated Wolverine, you know?
Let's not forget you were also weren't. This was obviously way before we started reviewing these movies. You weren't really into the X-Men franchise as much back then either.
I was hardcore into the superhero genre at large, though. So, I was interested in it, but I just ended up not going because it just looked a little mediocre. But yeah, I think that had the marketing, promised something a little bit more vigorous, it would have been better. I think if it would have, you know what the issue is? They tried to sell it as like another mid-2000s, almost kind of Bourne Identity kind of action movie. A little bit like the first two X-Men's. It's not like that at all.
I also feel like in places they're trying to copy off what the MCU was doing in the early days, especially with the big reveal at the end. There are places where they feel like they're trying to do kind of an MCU thing, and that doesn't really.
Sure.
That doesn't really suit them. What's interesting about watching this movie now, this is the first time I've watched the Wolverine in a post-Logan world. And having now seen what James Mangold did with Logan, comparing it to this movie, and also having X-Men Origins Wolverine to compare to both of them, I can so see which parts of this movie were him and which parts of it were like the studio being like, no, we need a big robot, Like I can just feel the fingerprints all over it.
Yeah, that scene definitely was a big like turning point. But at the same time, most of it doesn't feel like, again, like I said, it doesn't feel like it's made by committee. Most of it, it feels pretty. It feels like James Mangold's vision. But
right, it kind of feels like that famous.
It more feels like we're still stuck in this post X3 phase, and that was the other reason I didn't see this in theaters, was because I still hadn't seen X3, and I was like, well, I don't know what's going on. I mean, you really don't. All you have to know is what happened at the end of X3, which I did know.
That
Wolverine killed Jean Grey and stopped her from killing a bunch of people.
Yeah, which, by the way, that was another thing I really liked about this movie. It kind of made X3 worth it a little bit because it gave Wolverine, like, pathos for this movie.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, you and I talked about it. X3 is not as bad as people give it credit for.
No,
But
it's not as
this
good as
is
it could
way
have.
better than that as well, I think.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And it makes you wish, like, they had gotten to do more with them as an actual thing in those movies, because, like, her as a psychological construct for Logan here, because, that's all she is. And who knows if maybe she is more real than we think, because maybe Jean Grey left her own, like, psyche imprinted on Logan behind.
Yeah, it seems
to guide
possible.
him.
It seems possible that mutants with psychic abilities may be able to sort of preserve themselves after death because,
That must be what Xavier did at the very
exactly.
end in the after
Because
credits scene.
we have never gotten an explanation for how Xavier came back after the events of X3, and I kind of wish we could, even if it was in like a movie canon comic somewhere or something. I mean, and he's come back from the dead in the comics before, so I guess we just have to assume that it was something like
And
that.
it was exactly the same as what we just suggested. He shifted bodies with his magic telepathy.
Yeah, he was basically Palpatine.
Boop, boop, booped.
But wasn't like the Shi'ar involved or some shit? I don't remember. Or no, that was
they're bird people. Who knows what they're up to?
I know the Shi'ar helped him walk. There's a long, complicated history involving Xavier and the Shi'ar.
He's banging a whole bunch. He's banging a bunch of aliens. He's a wild dude, man. You can't stop him. You can't pin him down. But what I was gonna say before was I think that there's a lot of early 2000s action tropes that are lingering in this that also hold it back.
Mm.
Just like those beats of like dun 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 dun, and my boss at work pointed something out to me recently. Jackie Chan says that he can't take a lot of action in American movies seriously because there's just a lot of people standing around while the main guy beats up one person at a time, and there's a little bit of that in this. But most of the action is actually, like, really solid. And that's a big step up from the last one, where it was awful. They get a little more, like I said before, down and dirty. It's a lot of Logan, swirling around with his claws, trying to cut people's fucking limbs off.
Yeah, and it feels very kinetic. They use a little bit of like that shaky cam type thing, but they don't like use it too much. They don't overpower it. A lot of people make that mistake. You can actually tell what's going on, but they still get that kind of like handheld
And
like
they
frenzy.
fucking look good too. Thank Christ. The claws,
Yeah.
I mean, like because the CG claws
Yeah.
in
Oh, God.
in Origins
They were
were horrible,
so bad.
like so distinctly horrible. But in this one, they're great. Oh, and I'm sorry we're bouncing all over the place. You really should have seen this in order to listen to this. But we're not forcing you to do anything because we physically can't.
I will say that if you never watched this movie because you thought it was just another one of the bad ones,
You're absolutely wrong. It's one of the better ones. I think it's
I don't blame
it's as good as X2. I'm gonna go that far.
I don't blame you for thinking that because it was coming off the heels of Origins and it was PG-13 again and the trailers didn't look that good and the X-Men franchise seemed kind of dead at the time. We had one good one in the recent memory with First Class, but maybe that wasn't enough to raise your hopes and get you to go see the Wolverine. But maybe you didn't know that it was the same guy who directed Logan, and that should, in and of itself, give you some hope. Go give it a shot. You hypothetical podcast listener, you. But what were you about to say? You were about to make some kind of a point.
Fuck. No,
I fucked it up. Oh god.
Oh well, I mean, it was. Oh, okay. What I was gonna build to was there are a few moments where he is doing that ridiculous running around with the claws on. Like the people that he's lunging at like aren't in like the right position, so he kind of has to like run around in order to get in position, and it just doesn't look good. You know what it is? They don't want to put the money into having the claws retract. Did you notice how little of that we saw? The claws going back into his hands?
That's true. I mean, I guess it kind of... because they didn't.
I think it's a budget cutting measure. Like if you go back to Logan as well, and it's way less noticeable because that movie is just I think there's just more a little bit more thought behind it.
Well, it's a budget thing,
there's
but I
not
think
a lot of there's not a lot of the claws going in and out. It's a lot of they pop out off screen and then they come up.
Yeah. I mean, it is definitely a budget thing. I think there's also, though, an in-universe sort of logic to it, because in X1 he talks about how it fucking, like, hurts to pop his claws, so once he has them out, he might just prefer to fucking keep them out until the fighting's over. I don't know. But there were also some pretty clever uses of the claws, though. I really liked that one scene where they're like hiding in like the like janitor closet or whatever in that arcade, and then the Yakuza thug is running at the door because he knows they're in there, and as soon as he gets up to the door, Logan fucking puts his claws through the door.
That's great. Fuck, I was just about to mention one that totally slipped my mind.
Using his claws to stick to the top of the train.
Oh, I was about that's the one I was about to. And that looked surprisingly good. Like, I was thinking about it later. I was like, did that look good? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, it did actually look pretty good.
I think it's starting to age a little, but I think it still looks pretty good, especially for 2013.
Especially since the X-Men movies, to me, have some of the weaker CG in like. In these movies, like them in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, like just a lot of the CGI just doesn't look as polished as.
Fox seems to struggle with that. I mean, look at the fucking like AVP and shit.
That's true. Especially like AVPR and shit. Yeah, but in this, it all pretty much looked good. I mean, even the big robot at the end, which definitely it looked a little out of place, it still looked good. Yeah, it was. I'm trying to think if there's any effects that didn't look good. That bear at the beginning.
Oh well, the bear doesn't look great. I was about to say
it looks better than the bear in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, though. That's what I think.
You think so?
I think so. Go back to Dawn. Put it side by side with that bear. Maybe it's lighting. It could be lighting. I'll grant you lighting.
It could
looks
definitely
better to me
because it's much darker. I don't know. I've never really compared them because I think they both look pretty shitty. Why can't we get CG bears looking good? There are several examples of this.
Pretty good. I didn't have a problem with this bear. I have a problem with the Dawn bear though.
All right. I've never liked it, but I don't know. I'd have to look at it again a little closer.
Get up close and personal with that bear. Ask him what he's about.
Get in there. Get in that ass. Anyway.
If you want, I guess.
Oh, the scene where he goes into the bar and he fucking stabs the arrow through the guy's hand. Fucking.
That whole opening was really good because it was a nice little like. We get a bunch of just Wolverine kind of status quo stuff right up front. Everything, all the fallout from X3. Wolverine's living in the woods. He's drinking a lot. He's buddies with a bear. I love the moment when the bear has marked his territory, so Wolverine swipes his claws on the tree in order to reclaim the territory. That's fun.
Yeah.
If anything, my only criticism of all that is those fucking hunters. Like, you need, like, those characters exist in, like, every fucking movie like this, Just like those guys who just have to push it too far, and they always seem like they're around exactly when the hero's around. I'm not saying people like that don't exist, but it always feels super convenient. But I like what they did with it. The one guy goes up and shoots the bear, and he doesn't track it to put it out of its misery, so it ends up killing more people. So Wolverine puts the bear out of its misery, which is a really depressing scene and very emotional. Boo-hoo. So then he goes to the fucking bar.
I was happy to see the bear go, personally.
And man, you just fucking expect fucking... You just wanted it to die because you didn't think it looked good. Fucking... What was I gonna say? Damn it, you fucking... No, when he fucking stabs the arrow in that guy's hand, like I said, man, they were pushing the PG-13, without a doubt.
Definitely.
And I thought that was really effective. There's that great moment where Logan's like, "Why don't you ask me where I found it?" And he stabs the arrow. "Why don't you ask me?"
I love that.
He pours the drink on him. "Why don't you ask me?" And he goes, "Where did you find it?" Funny you should ask. I died. I died. It was so good.
See, that's an example of them borrowing something from the MCU that actually works here.
Well, yeah,
That
well, the reason why that trend in the MCU became popular.
Because that felt super Tony Stark, but they didn't overdo it either.
Yeah.
He's like he has quips here and there. He's
Wolverine. He should not be Tony Starking around. And,
No.
but Wolverine in the comics is a snarky fuck, so that's also very in line with the original character. But the reason why that trend in the MCU became popular was because
I feel like
their
James
people
Mangold
started to become a little more real, like the people, because that's how people talk in the real world. They make jokes, so.
Well, that's what Marvel has always had over DC anyway. People fell in love with Spider-Man because he was like the first time they read a superhero who felt like somebody like they knew, But that worked really well, I thought. It was a great line. And then we get introduced to somebody who I'm pissed hasn't shown back up. Fucking Yukio, get to talking into the new characters in this movie. Fucking
I really
comes in
like her mutant power.
That was so cool and interesting. And at the end of the movie, they fly off together, and it's like, so obviously they've gone off on adventures that we'll never get to see.
I'm kind of glad I didn't see this in theaters, because I would have been really disappointed that we didn't get a direct follow up. Because the idea of a status quo Wolverine, that's great. Like, that's what I've always wanted, like going around Wolverining,
Yeah, it feels like the pilot of like a really cool TV show, honestly.
Exactly. And the alternate ending with the proper suit, I don't know. I kind of wish that was in there because of the status quo.
That honestly is one of the few things about this movie that pisses me off. So,
at the same time, though, this Wolverine would not put that on.
For those of you who are unaware, for years, fans have been saying, why don't they put Wolverine in the suit? Give us the suit. Cyclops has his fucking eye thingy. Why can't Wolverine have his suit? He doesn't have to be bright yellow. I would have been fine with a fucking Bryan Singery black leather one if they had done that in the original movie. That would have been fine. But give me something.
It's more people wanted the cowl. People wanted the cowl that he's iconically known for.
Exactly, and they've never given it to us. They've been very, very adamant about not giving it to us. And there's a deleted scene. It's not even a deleted scene. It's an alternate ending from this movie. And now it's kind of a plot hole because you see Yukio before they get on the plane holding the box with it in it, but then you never see her hand it to Wolverine. That was what it was supposed to happen. Anyway, they get on the plane. All of the dialogue is the same. But then he's like, what's in the box? And she's like, open it and look. And he opens it and the fucking suit's in there. And then they like smile at each other. And there's no fucking... And it looks pretty good too. I wish he would have...
I think that in an X-Men universe where there are more costumes than just his, it would be awesome. But just in this universe, I just don't know if this Wolverine would put that on. But I do wish it was in there. Because it definitely would have been the time to do it.
You don't even if you never had him put the damn thing on, having that still be in the movie would have been a lovely gesture, I think.
Definitely, without a doubt.
To the fucking fans that you've been jerking around with this suit. And you know that it's like Fox's decision. Because
he had it in the comics before he became an X-Man. And he had it in the comics that this is based on, in the 4 issues where he went to Japan and fought off the Yakuza in the hand.
Obviously I wasn't there when the movie was being made, but I just feel in my soul that the reason it's an alternate ending is that the studio was like, maybe don't show the suit.
No, because they thought the same thing I did, which is like, oh, Hugh Jackman would never wear that ridiculous thing, And I just think that maybe they should have just, maybe because he didn't have to wear it. Like, that's the thing. In Days of Future Past, he wouldn't have had to wear something like that. Although, now I think about it, it almost would have made more sense to put him in the future stuff.
Yeah, because he's like hiding from future robots.
He like having a helmet, like armor wouldn't be a bad idea. I know he heals, but still.
Fucking Bishop running around with his armor. Logan doesn't get anything. What the fuck?
Yeah. But I think that if they ever reboot it, or if we ever see Hugh Jackman in like again in the Dark Phoenix or whatever timeline it is, I guess we'll probably see him in the suit, but it'll feel weird, to have waited so long.
Well, eventually they're gonna have to reboot it anyway. Especially
it's so weird for them to if they're gonna bring Hugh Jackman back after Logan. That was such a definitive ending,
Yeah, but it takes place in the future, so
Sure, they can. I'm
and
not saying they can't do it, and I wouldn't like it. I'm just saying that it would feel a little bit like, okay.
and they've also been very clear that it's like an alternate, like possible future. It's not like canonical with like the main like films.
I understand. I understand how movies work. Anyway,
but
I feel like
so yeah.
we've jumped around a lot on specific things we like and don't like. But what is the actual plot of this thing? Would you like to outlay that?
Well, I thought since you went back over the
Oh, I
comic
didn't do that, by the way. I didn't go back over it.
oh, well,
I do
but since,
remember things about it.
but since you are familiar with the comic that it's based off of, I was hoping that you could both A, talk about the plot a little bit, and B, give us an idea of just how loose it is.
So, like I said, in the general like setup, it's pretty much the same. Logan is summoned for some reason to Japan, and the actual reason he's summoned is different. Obviously, it's not, oh, I met your dad in World War II, or your grandfather rather in World War II, and I saved him from the atom bomb, and now he wants to thank me for it. No, there was some other reason, and it was probably connected to the fact that he had been banging Moriko in the past. So he goes there.
By the way, is that what Nagasaki really looks like? It was so much smaller than I would have ever imagined.
Well, you're probably thinking of Hiroshima when you think of the city that got bombed.
Well, yeah, sure.
Hiroshima
but I
was bigger.
I knew Hiroshima was a bigger city, but I guess I just assumed that they were both, because why would we bomb a fucking tiny-ass village?
I
Whatever.
think it was more about where it was as opposed to what it was.
Yeah, I guess.
So none of that, obviously, is in the original comic. So Wolverine shows up because Moriko is arranged to marry some douchebag, and he's not into it. He finds out he's cheating on her, and he decides to Wolverine it up and decides to cause problems. But the fact that he's Wolverine, like, this was also early on in Wolverine's day. Like, he has no remote semblance of the kind of healing power that he even does in this movie. Like, before he gets them taken away, obviously. Like, he gets shot, and then it heals overnight. Like, it doesn't heal instantly, you know? That's the Wolverine we're dealing with. And, he gets wrapped up in a conspiracy involving the Hand and the Yakuza. The actual plot of Moriko getting control of the company, and that's the reason everybody's after her, is the same. So,
Okay,
like I said...
okay. So,
you know what's cool? They took about as much as they could. That's what I think works, because they couldn't have really done. I mean, I guess they could have done. They had a relationship in the past, but Logan wouldn't have remembered it.
Yeah. Did they like splice it with any other stories you're aware of? I know that's like a big thing in like the MCU films now. They're, like
the
Thor
Silver
Ragnarok.
Samurai is not in the original comic.
No, and he's also very
I don't really know what his deal is, so if you know what he's about, maybe you can fill me in.
He's
Isn't he more an Iron Man villain?
I think he's popped up in different places over the years. He's a mutant. I don't remember what his ability is, but he's not a big fucking robot. He's just a dude in like a silver samurai armor, like superhero costume, and
Unless he's like the sacred fucking guardian of this dude's family or whatever.
He's okay. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page now. He's a legacy character. Apparently, there have been 2 different Silver Samurais. The first one originally appeared in an issue of Daredevil in 1974. So he's appeared in different places. The second Silver Samurai first appeared in Wolverine number 300. So that's probably the one that this one is more based on, very loosely.
But I think the taking of Wolverine's powers is something that's happened a whole bunch in different comics. I mean, obviously in Old Man Logan, he didn't lose his powers, but they were obviously drastically slower. And of course they took that in Logan the movie.
Okay,
else?
so
I'm trying to think of where else that's happened, because that definitely comes from somewhere.
Apparently the Silver Samurai's power in the comics is that he creates an energy field around his. He can create it around anything, but he creates it around his sword to like make it so that it can like cut through anything.
Well, in this, it's made of adamantium, and he heats up the adamantium so he can cut through Wolverine's claws.
Yeah,
which I thought was all right. Which I thought was okay.
Well, I think that's I thought that was pretty clever. I mean, if you were going to cut through Wolverine's claws, you would need something made of adamantium, and heating it up would probably be the best method. So
I kind of feel like, man, you know what? That was the other thing that I really liked about the whole movie. It just has such a good character arc for Logan. You know, like you don't get
Definitely.
to see him win very often in this series. He kind of gets a win in this one. You know?
Yeah, I think it kind of takes him from the guy we saw in the first three Wolverine movies, or the first three X-Men movies. I mean, the guy we saw there to who we eventually see in fucking Days of Future Past, running around in the past trying to fix shit.
Right, where he's like a guy who comes from a dark place, but he realizes that he has to do what he can.
Right, and what's great about it is, I think this is the first movie where Wolverine really feels 100% like Wolverine to me. We were talking about before how he's got like the snarkiness, and I think it's because James Mangold.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's James Mangold though. I think it's all his influence because you also go to Logan, and even there, it's like just he totally nails it.
Yeah, I think he gets the character in a way that Bryan Singer and the other directors who worked in the franchise up till now.
Well, Hugh Jackman clearly always got it, and let's not give Bryan Singer too much discredit because he set up the universe very well. You couldn't have any of this modern day X-Men stuff without
definitely.
up. But what he always really lacked.
Definitely still props to Bryan Singer. Maybe touched a few fewer kids.
But what he always definitely, and maybe have a little more personality in your movies. Maybe don't make just blank, people staring at walls for 2 hours. And that's not the whole movies, but there's a lot of dead space in those first two X-Men movies.
I mean, listen, I even defend Superman Returns to a point. So
I understand.
So I'm not fucking dissing Bryan Singer. I'm just saying that I feel like, in that respect, I'm just saying it's weird to pay him a compliment now, knowing the things that I know.
Jack the Giant Slayer sucks, though.
Was that him?
Yeah.
Oh, buddy. No.
Like you're in a bar, like, oh, Brian, why'd you do that, man? I had an idea. Well, you shouldn't have had said idea, you fuckwit. What are you going around having fucking ideas for? I mean,
Brian, you made that's literally the worst thing you've ever done, including all that.
Oh my God, Jesus.
Anyway,
Jesus can't even save us.
Anyway, no, I just feel like James Mangold had probably the deepest understanding of the character, and he managed to nail it.
Cut's a better Wolverine, I think. Get it?
Right.
Like I said cut.
Yeah. And you know what the other thing is? I think with Singer and the guy who directed X-Men 3, they also had ensembles to deal with, and this is him just having like the one central character to really nail. And I think
that was the weird thing about those movies is that he focused on Wolverine, but in his focusing on Wolverine, we still felt very distant from Wolverine because Wolverine didn't know himself in those movies. He was constantly like, "Who am I? My memories are gone. I have claws. What?" So he feels like a lost puppy in those movies. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that, like I said, Wolverine has a personality and a spunk when directed and written by James Mangold that he has not had in the other movies. And
I think it jives with just the story that they were telling with Wolverine at the time, because he was this guy who didn't know who he was, and he was getting his fucking memories unlocked by Xavier and trying to figure out all this shit. And by the time we get to this movie, he's pretty much figured all that shit out.
Yeah, he's sorted out his shit, at least in that respect.
Now he just gets to be Wolverine. Which is funny, because he spends most of this movie refusing to be called Wolverine.
Right. That was the thing that felt very Logan-y as well, is that he's abandoned his legacy as a hero. That was the thing that was like exactly what Logan was about. Was he was just a normal guy wearing glasses, driving people around in a limo.
Yeah. It's interesting because in this movie is called The Wolverine, but he walks around for most of the movie saying like, "I'm not the Wolverine anymore. I'm just Logan." Then in the movie called Logan, the one chick is like, "You're the Wolverine," and he doesn't give a shit. He's like, "Yeah, what of it?"
Yeah, but in that he's going around calling himself Jimmy, you know?
Yeah, it's true.
James Howlett.
Going back to his original name.
And they're just like, James Howlett died like 200 years ago, and he's just like, fuck!
He was my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather.
Who's the character who constantly claims that he's just his own son? I think it's, what's his name? In Highlander, the McLeod guy.
I mean, every immortal character should probably do that. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but he's the one who I remember, like, he specifically explains it as that's how he gets away with having all that money. Because that's the real issue, is that you would have that if you were immortal, because you would do that. You would, invest in stuff and save it up. And that's how he's able to keep it, is by having this inheritance that doesn't actually exist.
Right.
I don't know why Wolverine spends all his money on alcohol and leaves it in the woods with bears. So I guess that's why he doesn't have any money.
I mean, that's if you want to keep your immortality a secret.
He also hasn't been around as long as the Highlander.
I guess you could go the opposite direction and like reveal yourself to the world and be like, "I'm fucking immortal, bitch," and then you wouldn't have to worry about that shit.
It's not a bad idea for a crossover: Wolverine versus Highlander. Because they cut off his head, it just grows back, and they're just like, "What?" Because they think he's a Highlander.
Wolverine meets fucking Jack Harkness from the Doctor Who universe, and he's like, "You think you got it bad?"
Yeah. Because at least Wolverine will like probably die someday.
Yeah. Jack was literally blown to bits. Well, Jack technically did die, but as a giant head in the far billions of years from now future.
Right. True that. So on to the actual, like, let me outline the actual plot of the film, given the comparison I made to the comic. So Wolverine's summoned to Japan specifically because he saved Mr. Yoshida's life in World War II from the H-bomb. And seems to have explained his whole deal to him then. I like that we get flashbacks throughout the movie, because we're largely given a portrait of who Yoshida was, like, through other people's eyes until the very end. And through the flashbacks, there's like that one scene where he and Logan have that one like face to face, but it turns out everything he fucking said in that scene was a lie anyway. So, we largely get to know him through other people's eyes.
Well, one thing I liked about that scene is that I feel like, because at first when they knew the bomb was going to drop, he was ready to fucking commit seppuku right there and just fucking kill himself. So at that point, like all the other soldiers were doing, so at that point he was committed to like a very sort of old world Japanese sort of traditional mentality. Wolverine stops him from doing that, saves his life, assumedly gives him like a new sense of purpose, and then we skip ahead 70 years, and he sort of created this world that's like a hybrid of like those traditional Japanese values and like extreme futurism. He runs like this Stark-esque tech company with all this like weird shit and like the fucking like pin cushion bed thing that he sits on. That's like one of those toys that you put your hand on. That like, have you ever seen those things? With, like, little...
it's very strange. Yeah. It reminds me of the weird map they have in X1.
Yeah, but what's really interesting about it to me is that he kind of becomes obsessed with not dying. He goes from a guy who was willing to kill himself in service of his country to, because of his experience with Wolverine, he becomes obsessed with the concept of immortality.
Well, he takes the totally wrong message away from Wolverine. He looks at Logan, this marvel of evolution, and he goes, this guy saved my life and used his incredible gift to help me out. Instead of becoming obsessed with trying to help other people in the same kind of way that Logan could, but maybe just doesn't find his way to, he decides to, how do I, a regular guy, make my life last as long as an evolutionary marvel like Logan?
Right, well,
he becomes obsessed with that part of it, with the immortality, live forever power part of it.
He has that great line right at the end where he says your mistake was thinking that a life without end could have no purpose.
Right.
And then as he's starting to grow younger from stealing Wolverine's DNA, he's like, it is the only life that can.
Yeah, that was a really good line. I just like the twist on him, because through half the movie we think that he's like one of the good guys. I mean,
we also think he's dead.
Well, no, sure, but you don't really think that he had anything shady going on about him. You know,
Yeah, no, everything.
He was like this kindly old man who Wolverine saved, and that there's this dickhead son of his who's being a fuckwit.
Yeah, they give you a good red herring in the son, who is a villainous character, but isn't like the big thing going on. And then there's also sort of the mystery surrounding Viper and what her role and everything is.
All right, I better bring her up now, because that was another thing I was mixed on. I'm always down for more comic booky stuff, and I think the actress like gave that role her all. I still didn't like her. I still thought that she was really out of place and hammy, and just didn't like it.
See, I love me a good comic book villain chewing some scenery. And my God, does she chew some scenery?
It isn't that she's chewing scenery. It's that it just doesn't feel like not only does it feel out of place, it doesn't feel like everybody's playing it off in a way that's like fun. Like everybody's like, oh, she's really evil and really horrible, and I'm like, well, yeah, okay, but she's also like really weird and obnoxious. So yeah, she was a little much for me. Maybe a different casting choice would have saved that for me. I liked the direction of her character, but like I said, just didn't do it for me.
Something about the performance didn't work for you.
Something about the performance didn't sell the hamminess. Like I just didn't enjoy it. It felt, like I said, obnoxious to me. It didn't feel like Jim Carrey in Batman Forever. It felt like Tommy Lee Jones.
Oh no.
See, you understand the comparison, though, right?
I mean, I like both of them, but for very different reasons.
Well, yeah, but Tommy Lee Jones is doing this half-hearted Joker impression.
Can you imagine the gall of Tommy Lee Jones telling Jim Carrey that he could not sanction his buffoonery?
Yeah.
Considering all the buffoonery that he gets down to in that movie.
Yeah. But like I said, I think that's him half-heartedly trying to force that. And that's how that's how this character feels to me. It doesn't feel like a natural ham act like Jim Carrey, just kind of channeling that kind of energy. It feels forced to me. And I feel like there's a million female actresses out there who could have done that. So like I said, I just think a different casting choice would have saved that.
Interesting. I don't have that problem, but I can definitely see where you're coming from. I knew upon rewatching the film, I was like, I don't know how Bill's going to react to her, because I can see an argument either way. I
totally understand the idea of her and why she's and why she should be cool, but I just think they could have gotten a better person to. Her outfit was good as well, although now I got like Rita Repulsa Power Ranger 2017 vibes from her outfit.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about that.
That's not the movie's fault. I mean, like, obviously they didn't know that was going to be what the direction they took.
At the time.
But yeah, it looks exactly the same.
At the time, I got a lot of like, Uma Thurman, Poison Ivy vibes off of her because of sort of the hamminess of the acting, but also like, she's dressed in all green, she's poisoning people all over the place.
Yeah, it's similar to that. I had another problem with her as well. I didn't really understand how her powers work. I've seen that character before too in various comics and animated media, but never long enough to get a clear idea of what she's about. And I think it's been a man before as well. Because at one point she stabs the archer and poisons his face, and I'm like, okay, well, he's done. And then she cures him in like a second, and I'm like, oh, so could she create the antidote to her own poison? That's handy.
Well, she does mention... Well, she is a chemist, so she mentions that. She probably developed that skill specifically for that reason.
Okay.
Well, she does mention...
It felt weird.
What it seems to me, she mentions that she is immune to every poison known to man. So that's obviously a useful skill to have. And then her body also appears to be able to produce poison And perhaps she's able to control the lethality of it, like a snake deciding how much to inject. You know what I mean? I mean, she is called Viper.
Sure.
Maybe that's the idea. I don't know.
Mainly rattlesnakes are known for that, though. She should be called Rattlesnake.
There's probably already somebody called that.
DC villain, my broski.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. The fucking.
And then you have Diamondback in Luke Cage, Cottonmouth in Luke Cage.
I thought he was Copperhead, the guy from like the Justice League. Wasn't that Copperhead?
I'm talking about Copperhead. There's many different snake villains in DC. There was another one called Rattlesnake.
Oh, well, these are also all names of assassins from Kill Bill.
They're all snakes, man. Snakes are just violent killers.
I guess.
You don't hear any called fucking, right dolphin or whatever.
Now that's the supervillain name that I want to see somebody pull off. That's worse than Taserface. That's like...
You don't want to be saying that in the mirror. So Logan gets thrown into a Yakuza conspiracy to try and influence the most powerful corporation in Japan by killing the person or kidnapping the person who's going to become the heir to it, which is Moriko, the young Japanese granddaughter of Yoshida, who Logan prevents from fucking killing herself in the movie. At least that's what we are led to believe, and it seems like that was the intent. Mm-hmm. And from there, he continues to prevent her from dying, but not by her own hand, but by the Yakuza, and then later on by a bunch of other assassins, some mutant assassins, sent by a mysterious force that, as we already spoiled, turns out to be her grandfather in a big fucking robot suit trying to steal Logan's magic juice.
Yeah, well, there's also the Black Clan, the ninjas that work for Yoshida's family, and I wish there was a better... That's what I mentioned
with the Black Clan and various mutants. No, wasn't it just Viper? She was the only other mutant, right? Her and what was seeing dead people's future girl?
Yeah, Yukio. Yeah, those are the only three. Those are the only three mutants in the movie. Logan,
Do you
Yukio.
Think there should have been more?
No, I'm fine with it.
I think they probably hit the right balance. I think that maybe they should have cut out Silver Samurai and done another mutant there. Like maybe they should have made Yoshida a mutant or given him some kind of other power, like taken the abilities of some other character and given them to him.
Yeah, I liked the way they worked the idea of the Silver Samurai into it. I didn't like him turning out to be a big robot at the end. But like, there's that scene at the funeral where they explain that the Silver Samurai was like their traditional like family armor, and that it's
it's not bad.
It's sitting next to like his grave or whatever. Like, that was cool.
The way it opens and builds is very good though, and feels more like Japanese cinema than American cinema, and that's what I really liked about it. And the way the story is told, like, because the comic feels the same way. It's all very visual. There's a lot of emotive gestures in the eyes and a lot of subtlety that just doesn't exist in Western communication. And you get engrossed in it in a way that you just don't in Western cinema. And the fact that James Mangold was able to capture that so authentically, and Hugh Jackman is able to melt into that world so interestingly. Like I said, it's captivating, it's authentic, and it's unique, and another reason to give this a go, regardless of what hang-ups you might have about it.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, too. Because it's more of a samurai movie, it doesn't need the buckets of blood that you might expect from a Wolverine movie.
Well, it just depends on the samurai movie.
Sure, but the ones that I've seen don't have buckets of blood. They have a little tiny bit, because the cuts and the fatalities are not like these gouging fountains. It's like these swipes that cut an artery and then the guy's done. They drop.
Right. Yeah. It's all samurai sort of sword fighting techniques are meant to be very precise,
and that's exactly the way Logan fights in this, is he takes them down so quickly that you don't get the chance to see the gore.
They got great Japanese actors too to fill those Japanese parts.
Everybody's
I
really
thought they
good, and
thought they were really great.
they don't
Or,
feel like like Japanese Americans playing traditional Japanese either. They definitely feel traditional
no.
Japanese. And
As far as
Dylan, we can say that because you and I actually watch Japanese stuff.
as far as I know, they're all like actual Japanese actors. Some of them might be Japanese. I know one of them in particular, the like asshole son Shingen. He's a big deal. I've seen him in some other stuff. He was in The Last Samurai. Um,
Isn't
so
that
he's
an
like,
American movie though?
it is an American movie, but he's like a Japanese actor. He's been in a lot. He's been in American movies. He's been in Japanese movies. He's sort of crossed into both markets. But he was in the original Ring back in the day, Ringu or whatever. Um, like he's done a lot of shit.
Point is, it's authentic.
It's very authentic, and it feels very authentic.
And the cinematography of Tokyo, I got some sky. This obviously is in Japan, but I got some Skyfall flashbacks to the way Shanghai was shot in that.
No, true. Also, thank you for finally giving us an action scene involving a bullet train. Why wasn't that done before, to my knowledge?
I love the fucking moment where Logan gets on the fucking bullet train and it starts, and he goes back in the seat. He's like, so
Yeah.
what do these things go like 300 miles per hour? She just fucking shuts him up. It's so good.
Yeah, yeah. I really bought them too, like the connection that they.
Yeah, because I was surprised because when they first interacted, I was like, oh, are they really gonna fuck later? Because this is gonna feel weird, and then it didn't. It totally didn't.
Yeah, they actually played it off very well.
They kind of fell in love. It totally worked. It totally worked, and I like that again because I have read the comic, and they end up getting married in that. So, she was like a big deal for Logan in the comic. So I'm glad they were able to make her that big of a deal in the movies, especially since he's kind of been shafted in terms of love interest, even still. Like Jean was a non-start in every movie. The chick in Origins sucks ass. And,
she really does. She's terrible.
And then all you have is more, and you can't like Rogue is more of a daughter than anything else. Fucking
yeah. Then he has his literal daughter, but he didn't even get to fuck to have her.
No, they cloned him for that, and he was like bullshit. So yeah, I mean, Moriko really is his best love interest in these movies.
Would have been hilarious if he found out he'd been cloned. And he was like, I would have volunteered. I don't get any pussy in these movies. But
they had a child together in the comics, and he turned out to be a real fucking asshole.
Oh yeah, name starts with like a D, right?
Mm-hmm. He tried to kill X-24, and then she ended up killing him.
Doesn't he only have like 2 claws on his hands or something?
No, I mean No, I think he has the like Lady Deathstrike claws.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure. He has claws. I know he's got claws, but I don't think he has the X-24 2 claws. She has the toe claws as well.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got some other deal. But yeah, he's there. He is her son. She died at some point. I'm pretty sure in the comics, but in the ones that this is based on, the way that the theme is also similar in the sense of Logan definitely feels like a savage thrown into a like a fantasy like court of royalty and shit into this the higher echelons of Japanese society because he's this guy who's coming out of living in a cave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that idea was really well expressed, and that's exactly what the comics were about. Here Moriko has this American man who she's had this relationship with in the past come to her in this time where she's in the midst of dealing with Japanese politics and Japanese society, and she thinks that he's only going to make things worse for her, and here he is just fucking cutting up ninjas and shit. And this movie nailed that theme. I think it did it way better than the comic did, because the comic doesn't have the time to deal with that because it has all the shit with the hand that's got to explain, and it's only 4 issues. This I think did a way better job of getting the racism across, and maybe it's also because we're dealing with real actors and I'm seeing them, And whenever Logan walks into a room, you're just like, damn, he's tall compared to all of them.
I'm actually kind of glad that they didn't have the rights to the hand for this movie, honestly.
No,
Maybe it's
you
just,
don't need that.
maybe it's just Daredevil season 2 kind of ruining my taste for the hand. But I don't know. It's just a lot to get into.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think that was necessary. They didn't, like I said, they took everything they possibly could and needed to from the comic. And I actually think I like this movie a little better. The thing that's really good about the comic is the art and the ambiance and the visual storytelling. And the way it uses the character, obviously. Like, seeing Wolverine fight ninjas is always cool. Especially because he's in the outfit in the comics.
Yeah.
But this, I just think, is a way better character study.
Yeah.
No doubt.
I love that scene when they're at the funeral when Shingen tells him, he's like, time to go back to your cave. And I'm like, does he know that he was, I was like, does he know that he was living in a cave, or is he just being an asshole? Like, clearly he's being an asshole either way, but like, did he know?
No. I mean, remember, somebody asks Yomiko when she brings him in, like, who's the caveman? Oh, Moriko asks that. That was a great introduction to them.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, and when Logan gets cleaned up by the fucking, like, you only live twice style.
That's a great scene, yes.
I can do that bit. Yeah, it was great. Good shit.
That was lovely.
Yeah, the comedy in this movie is great.
Oh, there's another great one. When he, I remember when he throws the boyfriend out of the window. And she's like, wow, how did you know there was a pool down there? And he just goes, I didn't.
Which is bullshit. I remember I thought of this when I was watching that scene. He totally would have known there was a pool down there. Because he's got his smell. Even if his healing factor isn't working, his heightened smell should still be working. So he would have smelled the chlorine. He would have known there was a pool down there.
Would he have smelled it from all the way down there? And also,
yes.
It's an outdoor pool, so that might, the chlorine smell isn't going to be as... He knew
there was a pool down there. He was full of shit. He was trying to come off like a badass. I liked it.
Well, you know what? It worked. It's a great...
I think it's fun. It's like in Crocodile Dundee. There's this moment where Crocodile Dundee looks up at the sun, and the girl is like, "Oh, what time is it?" And he goes, "Oh, about 2:30." And she goes, "Why? You can tell that by looking at the sun." He goes, "Yeah." And then we look down and we see that he has a stopwatch. Like that. It's like that.
Yeah.
I love Crocodile Dundee. The first one.
I haven't seen that movie in so many years.
The second one, he's like stopping terrorists and shit, and it's weird.
Mm.
And then the third one is art thieves.
Why would a random Australian man be stopping terrorists?
No, I mean, the actual setup isn't bad, but it feels more like a Die Hard movie than a Crocodile Dundee movie.
Of course. Die Hard on a crocodile. It was only a matter of time.
I don't think there's any actual crocodiles in the second one. I think that's in the first one.
But,
anyway.
Are there any other humor bits? I'm trying to... when they go to that hotel and it's a couple's hotel and they can't get separate rooms. They played...
that's great.
They played all the awkwardness off there really well.
Yeah, that's well done. Well, I love all the stuff where Logan... Because like I said, what's also different from the comics is that Logan doesn't have any kind of rapport with Japan. So he doesn't know Japanese or anything like that. So he's just walking around going, I need a room. Give me a goddamn room. I'm an American. And she's just like, it's this.
I'm actually a Canadian, but that's a long story.
And he's been living in America for way longer, though.
Or was he originally from America and then lived in Canada? Or which one was it?
No, he was born. No. He was born in Canada, and then he moved to America during the Civil War.
That's right. What a fucking backstory he has. It should have made a much better movie than it did.
Well, I mean, Origin is a movie in and of itself. It's hard to condense that part of his life and not make it weird.
Yeah. I almost wish we could get more movies of just like him in random time periods that he lived through. What was Wolverine like during the fucking Civil War?
Everybody has always wanted a Wolverine Captain America movie in World War II where they're like fucking fighting. They're like saving Magneto from a concentration camp. That was always a great comic.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Maybe in the new Disney Fox future.
Yeah, that would be nice to retroactively throw Wolverine into World War II. I've kind of been hoping for that, for them to leave room for that.
The only problem is, I mean, unless they do a fucking big wormhole that crosses universes over, there's no way they can work the X-Men into the previously established MCU without having to just reboot both.
They would have to do it more like Ultimate, where Wolverine was the first mutant, and they all came from him, and Weapon X was the birth of mutants. That's what they'd have to do, and I think fans would hate it. So I don't know if they do that. It would have to be a wormhole thing, which is what I think they will ultimately do.
I think that's
so they can carry the cast over is probably what they'll do.
Yeah, and I get it. I guess that's the hand we've been dealt. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of how they end up doing that, it'll be weird.
Yeah. I kind of just wish they would keep them separate, honestly.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah. Although at the same time, though, I would like to see Magneto fight the Avengers.
I mean, listen, do I want to see fucking Ian McKellen have like a fucking like conversation with, I don't know, Sam Jackson? Sure. Why the fuck wouldn't I want that? But at the same time, from like a narrative standpoint, I'm like, God, there's just no good way.
It's a hard thing to do.
There's just no good way of going about this, given the way that both of these universes.
There couldn't be as many mutants as there are in most X-Men continuities. It'd have to be a way smaller thing. You could, I guess, what you could do. Here's a pitch for you. I know we're not talking about the Wolverine, but we're almost at the end, so we can kind of rant and rave. What they could do, and this would be insane, but it's a possibility. They could explain that, like, in the 40s, like, when Red Skull was doing his shit, Professor X and Magneto, or somebody else, some other mutant, took all the mutants to the Savage Lands. And they've been in the Savage Lands this whole time. And they reemerge from hiding and it's just the X-Men.
But then that just feels like Wakanda all over again. Or the fucking, like, Inhumans.
It would be,
living on the moon.
That would be very similar to the Inhumans, yeah.
Or Namor, who technically is also a mutant, fucking revealing that Atlantis is a thing, you know? It's just that, again.
True. They do have ties to the Savage Lands, though, so that's why I thought of that. I want to see the Savage Lands.
Yeah, that's a weird fucking idea that needs to be explored in a film. Give me fucking Sauron.
We got the Raptor in the Runaways TV show, so it's got to be out there somewhere. Yeah, there was a Runaways TV show, and they did the Raptor.
Interesting.
So Dylan, I mean, I think we covered a lot of the bases. So I mean, unless you want to talk more in detail about the fight at the end, and
yeah, I guess we should.
It's a little weird.
I guess we should, just because I feel like we've been dancing around it a lot. What I was going to say earlier with regards to the Black Clan is that I wish we had a little better understanding of like how that works, like the relationship between the Black Clan and the Yoshida family. Like it's briefly touched upon, and by the end you get it, but it's like yeah, it feels weird, like because at a certain point. Well, because he just makes it seem like the Black Clan was this ancient thing that doesn't exist anymore when he talks to Wolverine at the house, Yoshida. And then they show up later on in the movie, and it's like, oh, there are ninjas in the movie now. Okay. You know, but whatever. Yeah, so the end of the movie, well, first Shingen kidnaps... Oh, no, before we talk about the end of the movie, Bill, there's another big element of this movie that we should probably talk about, and that is the whole bait and switch where you think Wolverine's going to die. Because they have Yukio, who has that really interesting mutant power where she can see people's future, but she can only see them dying. And she mentions to Wolverine that at one point during the course of the film, she has a vision about him, and she sees him dying in a very specific way, which kind of mirrors the way that he ends up dying in Logan, TBH.
Probably done intentionally.
Probably. But yeah, so she's convinced that he's going to die, and she mentions that she's never wrong. And he's like, well, you were wrong about Mr. Yoshida. And later on we figure out why she was wrong about Mr. Yoshida, because that fool ain't dead. But at the time they think he's dead. So he's like, you were wrong about him. Maybe you're wrong about this too. Whatever. I got to fucking get this thing out of me. By the way, there's a thing in him that's keeping his powers from working. And so there's this moment where like he fucking, and it was such a clever workaround. He did technically die. He flatlined on the operating table and was out for like several seconds, like people sometimes do in the hospital. So technically, she wasn't wrong. The man did die, but then he fucking his fucking
He
healing
comes
powers.
back at exactly the right moment.
His fucking healing powers kick in, and he fucking. That was a great moment though when Shingen's about to cut her down with the katana, and then he just catches it with his claws. Ah,
The
beautiful.
best moment in that whole bit, and the best use of his healing factor, was when he got stabbed with the samurai sword, and then he pulled it out like a samurai pulling out a sword, of a sheath, but it was his body.
Yeah,
That was pretty fucking cool and iconic.
yeah, it's a great moment.
And then you have that killer action scene where he gets all the arrows in him. Yeah, it's
Yes. So there's that.
killer movie.
So there was that moment which I wanted to mention because I thought it was clever that they worked around it. Like technically he did die, so she wasn't wrong. Her powers, it still all makes sense within the context of the film. You don't necessarily have to bring Logan into it and be like, she wasn't wrong because he wound up dying in a very similar way in Logan. No, it's probably just like he did
No,
technically die.
because when she meant when she said heart in his hand, she meant it literally.
Yeah.
She wasn't being figurative when she said it, but the fact that he did end up dying that way in a movie, like figuratively with his heart in his hand, with blood everywhere, yeah, that's cool. That ended up happening.
I appreciate your attempt to be poetic, fan theorist, but yeah, it's probably just a reference to the fact that he technically did die. But anyway, so all that happens, but so basically Shingen had kidnapped his daughter with the help of the Yakuza, but then before they could get to the place to save her from him, fucking Viper bursts in with the Black Clan and kidnaps her from him. There's a lot of this woman just is getting so much kidnapping going on in this movie. So she, it's like she's a human like the fucking like Tesseract from fucking like Avengers. It's like that,
getting tossed around.
She's that, but a human. It's weird. But anyway,
after her because she's going to become the most influential woman in Japan.
Yeah. So, which did we explain why her father wanted to kidnap her and kill her? Basically, he was mad that.
I explained that was the whole deal with the original comic and this, that she's going to become the head of the Yoshida company, and that's why everybody's after her.
He's pissed because his father skipped a generation and passed the company down to her instead of him, which is irrelevant because in reality his father wasn't planning on dying, but but still. So anyway, they go. So they find out where she is now. The Black Clan have taken her to this like facility up north, and it's really cool because it's designed like a classic like Japanese like castle, like fucking Kyoto Castle, but it's all like metal and shit because it's new. And he goes there to retrieve her. He has this fight with the Black Clan, which is fucking brutal. They're fucking shooting arrows into his back with ropes and fucking holding him back and shit. And that's all great
shot
stuff.
with the Viper poison.
Yeah, it's all great stuff. And then he gets there, and then suddenly things take a stupid turn.
All of a sudden, all the dialogue feels really weird. Everybody's giving us exposition as lines, and then they stop talking like people, which is what we talked about earlier. The rest of the film has that kind of realistic dialogue.
Yeah, it kind of almost turns back into X-Men Origins Wolverine slightly.
A little bit, yeah.
Like it goes back in that direction, and again, I feel like that's the studio being like, no, we need a big fucking Ironmonger was a thing, put a robot in it.
Like that one moment where. Like, I liked all the ideas of Yoshida stealing his powers and, taking the adamantium out of him.
Yeah.
But when he sticks the drills into his claws, it seems like, all right, this was specifically designed for him to be in this specific situation. That feels dumb.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of that in the X-Men comics. There's always like some scientist who's trying to like steal mutant powers from a bunch of mutants and like combine them or take them for himself, shit like that.
That's the plot of literally every X-Men movie. But the issue is not that. It's that it just looks stupid. It looks like, so Yoshida planned to have Logan being hung over a fucking cliff and having the drills descend down.
Okay, so no, that's not as stupid as you're making it sound, Bill. Here's the thing that you're not thinking about. Originally, they had Logan strapped into a chair and they had clamped his arms so that he couldn't retract his
That's
claws.
funny. That wasn't what they were gonna do, though.
Yeah, they were. The fucking Silver Samurai was raising his sword over his head to cut his claws in half so that he could then use
Oh,
his
okay.
fucking drill
Okay.
things.
True. All right. Fine.
Yeah.
It's
but-
it's still convenient that he ended up in that position. So that way
well,
he
sure.
can-
Yeah.
it is as dumb as I'm making it seem.
Well, no.
It's for a
Okay,
different
so
reason.
the plan isn't as dumb as you were making it seem. The execution of the plan is still questionable.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is that was thought out clearly.
Mm-hmm.
But
It just does. It looks a little weird. Without a doubt.
it's just weird that they turned the Silver Samurai, who's just this mutant character from the comics, they took that idea and they turned it into a big fucking robot. Like
The fight's good. That was the one thing I was surprised by, because I was like, oh, the CG is not amazing, but the actual choreography is not bad.
yeah, I liked the I liked the callback to the flashback that he had earlier. There was like some foreshadowing there where when they're in the hole back in the 40s, Yoshida was like, "Samurai sword requires two hands," and then later on he realizes that he has to hold it with both hands to activate the heat thing. That was neat, I thought.
What I really liked was they genuinely kept going, let's just keep taking shit away from him. So we get this healing factor back. Then he gets shot by the Viper arrow, so the healing factor is basically done. And then he gets so then he goes back up to the fucking temple, and he's got healing factor and his adamantium claws. Then Yoshida takes away his adamantium claws. So then he's got to wait for Yoshida to get all cocky and up in his face, so that way he can use his bone claws that grow back in the interim to stab him, which I thought was fucking amazing.
Yeah. Way to bring back the bone claws.
Yeah, no, really good stuff, and it's like it's one of those few callbacks to Origins that make you go, oh, well, I'm kind of glad we saw that, so that way this makes more sense.
Yeah, and it's also this universe's kind of version of when Magneto ripped all the adamantium out of Logan's body in the comics, and for a while he had the bone claws again.
Right. Exactly. No, all of that was good. The dumbness came in the dialogue. All like I said, just man, I don't know, man. Viper's dialogue. The Viper's dialogue all sound like, "I'm immune to every poison known to man, including the poison that is man himself." And I'm like, all right.
I did like the part where he thought he had killed her though, but then she like fucking shed her skin
Yeah,
like
that
an
was
actual.
cool.
That was some freaky shit. But then she's like hissing, and I'm like, all right. Like she's running towards him. She's not just running towards him with like a look on her face like I'm gonna kick your ass. She's like, ah! And I'm like, all right, calm down.
That looked a little bit like the Adrian Brody movie Splice, and I was like,
Oh God.
Don't need that. Don't need him banging it.
Where he has sex with his technical daughter.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep. Yep.
What is this, a Bryan Singer movie? Anyway,
Not that one.
no. What was I saying? Yeah, so, and again, just, it's so dumb. It's so gives you a flashback to X-Men Origins Wolverine when they did the thing with Deadpool. It's just a little more bearable because Silver Samurai isn't as iconic of a character as Deadpool is. But it's the same kind of thing. It's like, oh, he's a big robot.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's thematically a lot more relevant than what the hell Deadpool was, but
Yeah, and at least it's like, okay, so I do like the idea of it being like a modern take on like a samurai armor. That's cool. Does it have to be so big though?
if it
Like
was
that-
if it wasn't Ironmonger, it would be fine. It also
Yeah.
looks like the Shredder from the 2014 TMNT. If it was
does.
just like Iron Man armor, it would be fine. It's because it's a
Yeah.
big robot.
I think that's where it becomes obvious that they're ripping off Ironmonger. Because literally, especially after Wolverine cuts off the head, and then Silver Samurai picks him up, and you just see Yoshida's fucking tiny-ass Japanese head poking out of this big iron body.
Logan.
It was me the whole time. At that point, you're like, well, this is clearly just Ironmonger, because it literally just looks like an Iron Man when fucking Ironmonger's helmet opened up and fucking Jeff Bridges was in there being like, remember me? I'm the fucking dude.
I'm the villain.
I'm here to be menacing. I wish that was all actual dialogue from Iron Man, by the way. That would be...
It was. Didn't you see the movie?
uh, but no, it was just literally Ironmonger. It was just Japanese Ironmonger. Again, if it was just like a modern take on samurai armor and it was just like Iron Man sized, I think it would have been a lot
I
better.
wish there were more designs in the armor. It is literally just an Iron Man suit. Like that is
It's just
really.
it's just Ironmonger, but Japanese. Like I'm not
Yeah, no, no,
exaggerating.
not even Iron Man. It's just Ironmonger. Had it been more like an Iron Man suit, it would have looked like a more human scale. It would have looked cooler. I think a fight with Logan would have been better there too. Like,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
like a more like grounded fight between like a almost like a Kamen Rider-y looking dude and Wolverine. That would have been cool.
yeah. Because then it would have had some more of like a Japanese influence there. Yeah, that could have been cool. I mean, I get it. The thought process never went any further than big robot menacing, little robot less menacing.
Right,
Like that's
exactly.
clearly
That's the American mentality. Exactly.
that's the logic that was being applied here. Um,
It's not terrible. It's just not great.
no, it doesn't ruin the movie, especially since the stuff that they're doing with the characters in it is still good. Like all the stuff about Yoshida wanting to steal the healing factor, and like we talked about that, and he has that great line about like being immortal is the only life that can have any. That's all still great. It's just the fact that it's a big dumb fight with a big dumb robot that kind of it kind of lets you down a little bit because it's like, oh, this movie was so much better than that. Like just 5 minutes ago.
I totally agree.
Did you think the old man makeup was all right in this movie? I always thought it was kind of.
It has its moments.
I do like I do like the moment when he's actually stealing Wolverine's power and like they digitally remove the makeup and he starts looking like he did in
It
World
was
War
nice
II.
and gradual. When he was on screen for a while at the beginning,
Yeah,
I felt
first
like it was really noticeable.
yeah the first time you see him on the table, I'm like that's not great.
That's why I think they were smart to largely develop him through other people. Because
Right.
he felt a little bit like, okay, he looks like a cartoon character.
And having him presumed dead for most of the film was probably a wise choice because
Yeah,
the makeup was not there.
I'm with you. Yeah, that was another issue. Without a doubt. But,
Oh, and since this is Samurai Month, we should probably mention the whole. They do use like samurai culture as like part of the.
yeah, we haven't mentioned that enough. Oh, I mentioned the whole he pulls the sword out of his body like a samurai unsheathing his sword. There's a lot of visual cues like that, obviously, but there's a lot of themes of Ronins, a samurai without a master. And,
yeah, that's a big thing.
and a samurai, finding a purpose, and the fact that a Ronin's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, yeah.
All that was good, and that's what felt very like at the core of the themes of Wolverine in general, which is why I think this fits in with this month so well. Finding honor through your own actions as opposed to, hey, you do this and do that. Just letting people order you around.
Yeah, there's also all the stuff about him being like to Mariko about like you're gonna do this arranged marriage, like is that a good idea? There's even a part where she mentions to him like you wouldn't understand, you're not Japanese, and it just reminds me of a large portion of samurai cinema is all about like critiquing samurai culture. Like it's not all like a bunch of yojimbos running around having a good time cutting up people. There are a lot of samurai movies. One that we'll be talking about later in this month, by the way, are very very critical of like the whole Bushido code and like the traditionalism and everything. And it's all like like hey, this was fucked. And I feel like in a similar way, like that moment is like, hey, this arranged marriage thing is kind of fucked. And she's like, you don't understand, it's this whole thing.
Yeah. I thought they played that off well.
But yeah, I guess we're done.
Definitely. So I'll say this one last thing. I think there's a lot of small issues and some larger issues, but not huge issues that hold this back, but nothing that overwhelms any of the positive qualities of this movie, because I just think it's very well made. It's very fun. It has a lot of depth to it, more than I think even the popularly conceived in-depth X-Men movies. Like I said before, I think it's just as good as X2, just as deep, just as just as much meat on it. So I definitely think that it's worth watching. I don't think it's as good as like First Class, or it's obviously not as good as Logan, but
Definitely, yeah.
It's right up there. It's just as entertaining and just as thought-provoking.
It wasn't a huge success at the time, and we talked about it. It kind of got buried because it was a big year for like superhero movies, and it kind of isn't really talked about that much. I think it's very underrated. But I appreciate that it was obviously good enough for Fox to give James Mangold another shot, and to actually give him the R rating that we've always been clamoring for. And
yeah,
so,
and obviously they're like, oh, thank God we did that now.
Yeah. So without this movie, you wouldn't have Logan, and yeah, that's one thing I appreciate about Fox, that they'll hopefully maintain whatever shape the company looks like in the future, is that they do have a willingness to take chances. Then they're the ones who fucking took a chance on Planet of the Apes back in the day.
I mean, they took a chance on Planet of the Apes again in recent years. I mean, Rise was definitely a risk.
And they took a huge chance recently by being like, hey, let's do what our competitors over at Disney aren't willing to do yet, and let's do an R-rated superhero movie. See how that comes out. And they've done 2 of them now, and they've both been very well received. So
yeah, definitely. So I think this was the beginning of a good trend for them on that front, and I'm glad to see that it paid off in the end.
And there's more coming. I mean, we've got a superhero horror film coming from them later on this year.
Yeah, it looks okay.
It looks okay, but I'm just glad that
it exists.
Trying.
Yeah, like the idea of it alone. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally with you.
I'm glad that they're trying that. Like that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody would have ever tried that in like 2008, or.
No, there's been like nothing that's that like overt about it. It's all like kind of. You get your Ghost Riders and your fucking Constantines.
Oh, sure.
That kind of exactly, that kind of mixed shit. But they're all slaves to the conventions of the genre, not New Mutants.
Well, those are superhero films with like horror elements.
Exactly.
New Mutants appears to be from the trailers.
That's a horror movie in a superhero universe.
Exactly.
Yeah, which I think which I think is pretty cool. That's what I want to see, like a Werewolf by Night movie or Netflix show that's in the MCU. Just so we can see what a werewolf would be like in the Marvel universe.
It's time for Marvel to take more chances. Beyond, and I mean, I know they just recently did take a very big chance and it paid off, but I'm talking about like chances with the material, not who you've got on the cast. That's a very easy chance to take. Let's take a chance with the actual writing here.
Definitely. I think that this was a good first fucking step in that direction.
So yeah, that was the Wolverine. Definitely, if you haven't seen it yet, if you have any level of interest in the X-Men franchise, but maybe this is just one you haven't gotten around to, I get it. We've all got those. I still need to see Ant-Man. It's the only MCU movie I haven't seen. Check it out. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with it. I think there's again some flaws. Some pretty big flaws, but it's miles ahead of X3 or Origins Wolverine. It's kind of like in the middle of the pack, to be honest. So, but check it out. Next week, we're gonna quit bullshitting around with these American movies that have samurai influences. We're gonna get into the real meat and potatoes of the actual samurai genre, because next week we're gonna talk about an Akira Kurosawa film. That being actually the first Kurosawa film I ever saw myself, so this will be interesting to talk about. Throne of Blood, starring Toshiro Mifune, because of course it does. So
heard a lot about this, so I mean, it's going to be interesting to see for myself and see how I feel about it. Seen bits and pieces of it in film school, but never in full. So we'll see.
Yeah. So far, Bill has had a very good month here on Samurai Month.
I'm waiting to hate something.
I knew he was going to like Samurai Jack. I felt it in my bones. But I wasn't sure about the Wolverine. I'll be honest. I wasn't sure about it.
I wasn't sure about this one either. Yeah, I mean, I went into it with zero expectations and not liking any of the trailers I've ever seen for it. And the few clips I've seen never impressed me. So I was really happy that when I sat through the whole thing, I was like, oh no, this is actually great.
Mm. But yeah, so come back next time, and we'll get into some real samurai shit.
We'll sit on your throne of blood.
We will. But until then, this was a podcast. Colonel, what's the thing? What is it? I'm never gonna
Well,
remember.
first
it,
our
so you might as well.
names. Our names. I was Zazubaar,
Right, right. You were, and I was Super DM 64.
and you heard it, and you can't unhear it. Deal with it, Colonel Hogan.